lot. I lost a huge amount of weight.
Oh,
I
right.
lost probably a quarter of my body weight
What?
in the last 2 years. But
So many people are
at a
desperate
quite
to do that.
learning about plant-based sort of nutrition and whole food plant-based diet. I was able to apply that to myself,
Hmm.
and I lost a lot of weight. My mental health is a lot better. My mood is a lot better. My ability to bounce back from periods of a low mood, for example, is
So
a lot better
it's
now.
like mental resilience.
Yeah.
Hi, this is my first ever podcast, and I've got the amazing guest, a good friend here called Dr. Surabhika. So I'd just love you to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do.
Sure. Thank you, and really well done for doing your first ever podcast. And I'm honoured to be the
Thank
first
you.
guest. Um, but a little bit about me. So my name is Dr. Surabhika. I am currently a GP trainee in the UK's National Health Service. I have a real passion for preventative and lifestyle medicine, as well as a real passion for sort of health inequalities and health equity, as it were. So so I really try to integrate lifestyle medicine in my daily practice, which, contrary to popular belief, I think if we look for the opportunities, we can actually fit it into our daily life and into our daily consultations. Other than that, I love cooking vegan food, and I love going on walks and just talking about plant-based living every opportunity that I get, really.
Yes, you do. And I've seen your TikTok videos, I've seen your Instagram, and I love your energy and the fact that you can literally talk about plant-based life, plant-based food, morning, noon, night. It doesn't matter who's watching, it's literally a part of you. And I love the energy you bring to it. And the fact that you've been invited to Veg Fest. Tell us
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you put yourself out there, and when this is, for me, this is my life's passion, and I think, it's formed a part of my calling and my professional life as well. So I think this opportunity kind of presented itself, and I was extremely nervous, and the imposter syndrome within me was running really strong.
Right.
So, but I don't know. I was just really lucky, and I'm excited to accept this opportunity. So I'll be talking at VegFest at Brighton, in Brighton, in April of this year. So if you're around, feel free to come along. It's on the 29th of April. My talk is on plant-based diets, where is the real evidence? So we'll go through some of the evidence behind that at 11 o'clock in Brighton. So come
Sounds
along.
good. So it's in person in Brighton, April. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And you're not lucky. You said that you're lucky that this came on. But what chance, I guess, had a part in it, but you were prepared and you were doing your thing, which is, I'm guessing that's how the opportunity came your way.
I think I'm doing it on behalf of this absolutely fantastic organization called Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, which is headed by Dr. Shireen Kassam, and she put the opportunity out there, and I thought, let me see if this is right for me, and she ended up selecting me. So I'm
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So what inspired your move towards veganism? Had you been vegetarian before, or?
Yeah, so I think that's a really pertinent first question, I guess, because for this, I think to answer this more appropriately and fully, I think I'd like to go almost to the beginning. So I was raised
Give us
vegetarian.
origin story.
The origin story, if you like. So I was raised vegetarian in an Indian household with a faith system called Jainism. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, Jain, Jainism. And really the biggest, most important value that has been impressed upon me since childhood is something called ahimsa, which broadly translates to non-violence, or perhaps more correctly, peace towards not just oneself, but those around us, so the people in our lives and strangers, but also other animals and also the planet at large, so our environment at large. And so this was kind of the value system that I was brought up with from a very young age. But fast forward to 2018, I was in my mid-20s, and I sort of stumbled upon a documentary on Netflix called Cowspiracy, and that I think yeah, that kind of was like that, because for me that kind of led to the probably emotionally the most intense week of my life, where I went down this massive, I mean, I think for people it happens differently, but for me this is how it happened, where I went down a massive rabbit hole of sort of watching all of these documentaries about you know, the issues with animal agriculture, the ethical side of veganism, the environmental side of animal agriculture and plant-based diets and things like that, but also the health aspect of it. So the documentaries I've watched were Forks Over Knives, What the Health, Cowspiracy, like we've mentioned, and one documentary that I've still not managed to get through all of is Earthlings, which just was emotionally so heart-wrenching.
And is that why you couldn't get through it?
I just simply cannot. It's too heartbreaking for me personally, but I think it's a big eye opener. But the bottom line of this was that I made making that ethical connection with veganism allowed me to finally, for the first time in my life, really live life that was directly and fully in alignment with my values. I was able to look at myself in the mirror and, you know, not have to think, is this the right thing? Is this not right? I don't know. But I was just able to look at myself in the mirror without having any questions like that. And I think at the time I'd also said, you know, if I just remember thinking that, you know, if I meet somebody romantically that I don't feel as strongly about as I do about veganism, then they're probably not the one. And so for me, this thing has been probably the single most important decision in my life.
Interesting. They also influenced like your dating and marriage choice, and like it really shows how deep this is to your value system and how important it is to you. I love that you used the word alignment as well. So since you're married, I guess your husband takes is he vegan as well?
So this is interesting because he was not raised vegan or even vegetarian. He's grown up eating meat, but and you know, I think there's this idea that if you're vegan or whatever lifestyle choice you make, you tell the people around you and you kind of can force them to follow this. But I never quite did that. All that happened with him was he just kept seeing me and seeing me live my life, and over time, he himself has come to the conclusion that actually he would like to be following a plant-based diet himself. This was something that he came about himself completely. So I'm really grateful that he's made that transition and that journey of his own accord. But I think if we try to push and force somebody into something, that's just a recipe for disaster. So I don't think I'd ever try to do that.
Green browns and then end up, you know, having a barbecue at the weekend in secret. So how does having a plant-based diet help you live a healthy life or make healthy, you know, life choices?
Yeah, sure. So I think initially, as I described, my strongest connection with veganism or a plant-based lifestyle was the ethics side of things. So that I think allowed I felt at peace with myself and with the life that I was living. So my mental health in some ways was taken care of back in 2018. But at that time, I hadn't made as strong of a connection, or I hadn't educated myself as to some of the health implications of a lifestyle like this, which I have to say that I only really, really, truly absorbed in the last couple of years. And I would say since the pandemic probably is when I discovered plant-based nutrition as a whole, but also lifestyle medicine in that wider context, and have started to implement those changes over the last couple of years. And I think some of the more I suppose, more quantitative measures in terms of my own health in the last 2
It's
years.
very
I have.
technical. What do you mean?
So what I mean by that, I suppose, I think I have to say today, 5 years on from
Yeah.
starting my trend, like my sort of plant-based lifestyle, I feel a lot healthier. I know that I am a lot healthier, but in terms of some of the objective metrics that we measure health-wise, I would say, so I lost a huge amount of weight.
Oh, right.
I lost probably a quarter of my body weight
What?
in the last 2 years. But
So
I
many
was
people are
at a
desperate to do that.
I was a very unhealthy BMI. I was almost, I think my BMI at the time was 28, 29. But learning about plant-based sort of nutrition and whole food plant-based diet, I was able to apply that to myself, and I lost a lot of weight. My mental health is a lot better. My mood is a lot better. My ability to bounce back from periods of a low mood, for example, is a lot better now.
It's like mental resilience.
Yeah, I think my resilience, that muscle of resilience, has been exercised over time. I think my food plays a really foundational role in that, actually. Whereas, say 2 years ago, I might have said, oh, I feel a bit low today, I will reach for these comfort foods, and I'd be more impulsive with my food choices. But today, my mental health rests on a foundation of generally good nutrition, I would say, wholesome plant foods, which feeds my mood and also my physical health as well. So
So what are your comfort foods then? Because you have those days where you want to like reach for something or have a little, what do you snack on?
Yeah, so I think, what do I snack on? I mean, I'm somebody who's traditionally always gravitated towards the usual suspects, so high sugar, high salt, so crisps, chocolate, that kind of thing. I've always loved those things. And it's not that, they're completely cut out from my diet, the sort of saltier, sugarier foods, but it's just that I like to generally operate on a 90-10 basis, where 90% of my food is as wholesome as it can be. So it's centered around whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes, lentils, and then 10% of the time. So for example, it was my birthday recently, so I had a slice of cake, and that's okay, and I felt good about it. It didn't feel guilty about it. I haven't chosen to demonize certain foods or anything really like important.
Thanks for telling us a little bit more about your diet and your lifestyle choices. So I just also want to explore the fact that you're a doctor, obviously, and you've made a bit of a professional pivot. So I understand you used to work as a hospital doctor. So can you just tell us about what you do now and what you did do before?
Yeah, sure. So I actually I did what is called internal medicine training. I did that for 2 years, actually pretty much during the pandemic. And that was obviously very emotionally, physically, mentally taxing at the time. And I would say that at that time, I probably wasn't really looking after my health. I think in medicine, we have this martyr complex. Yeah, exactly. Where, we sort of lay ourselves down in the name of, oh yeah, we're looking after our patients, we're doing our job. And I was very much doing that at the time. But since then, I think, especially during the pandemic, so I was working in North London in a hospital that served a very deprived population, sadly, where I really had my eyes opened in a quite harsh way to some of the wider determinants of health. So that would be, I think, your lifestyle choices, but also your socioeconomic determinants. So do people have the money to go and get the medications that they've been prescribed? Do they have, the money for a bus fare? Exactly. Do they have to rely on food banks where they don't have the choice of what they're going to eat? Things like this. So I really had my eyes open to that. And at that time, what I discovered was that I'm actually much more interested in the preventative side of medicine. So I actually even explored public health for about a year. I thought, is this what I should be doing? But then I think I came to the conclusion, after a lot of soul searching and a lot of thinking and educating myself, actually, that I love people. I think the people is half of the reason why I am a doctor, and I want to continue that connection with that human element of it really, really, truly just speaks to me. So I think that's why I went into general practice, where I was able to, continue to have the stories of people, their longitudinal like journeys through life, and
So you're
also the
seeing people
holistic.
through, the chronic illnesses, and you see them, over
Absolutely.
years.
And you're able to develop a real relationship with them when they're not so unwell that they can't even, engage in a particular conversation about lifestyle things and long-term changes, So that's why I'm doing general practice, and within that I'm really trying to integrate lifestyle medicine and the different pillars of lifestyle medicine within that. And I suppose as part of that, I've done a diploma with the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. So I'm a certified lifestyle medicine physician.
Sometime end of last year, so that's really exciting. And you got your certification recently.
Yes, so that was in December of 2022. So I was really, really fortunate that I was quite supported in terms of, just being able to do that alongside my general practice training. And then I also did a plant-based nutrition course at the University of Winchester a few months before that, which further informed my sort of decisions and my own lifestyle, really. So I like to have that spill over into my patient contact time.
So you mentioned that you see your patients over a decent period of time. Tell us what does your typical day look like as a GP?
My typical day. So I am a GP trainee, and so I actually I'm still rotating through different specialties at the moment. Currently I'm actually doing general practice, which is been really gratifying because I do get to see those people with there are some patients, which we might go on to a bit later, where I've had the privilege of overseeing some of their care over a period of 3 or 4 months. Arguably that's not quite long enough, but it's still something at this stage. But so I typically see patients in clinic during the day, and then in the evenings I like to try to work on some of the other things that I'm doing at the moment myself outside of that training aspect. But I mean, even within my GP training, I really like to take an active part in my training and sort of what the other trainees want out of their training program. So I was recently selected as the trainee sort of committee, the junior doctor committees within my local training, but also within sort of the region. So I was fortunate enough to sit in on an interview panel to what's the word? I forgot the word.
Like you're feeding back on what people want, like out of their training, or
so we feed back on what people want, but as part of that role we're also able to sit in on interview panels for training program directors.
Also, you're like one of the, well, not necessarily a layperson because you're obviously experienced yourself, but you contribute to those interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're part of that sort of process as well, which is really reassuring because it's really refreshing to see that the trainee voice is valued and heard in these processes as well. So I'm fortunate to be doing that.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that you have that kind of, you have a leadership and management component to what you're doing, and you're gaining experience. Tell us about some of those patient encounters that have really made an impact on you, or where you feel like you've been able to make an impact on your patients.
Sure. So I think there are 2 patients that come to mind. One is a completely unexpected, I just didn't think that this would go this way, but this was a 57-year-old gentleman, Caucasian gentleman who very, big, tall gentleman who, and I'm very petite
kind of build.
Yeah, exactly. All of those kinds of stereotypes. He's ticking all these boxes, and he came in and he's got all these increased cardiovascular risk markers. So he had high blood pressure, he had diabetes, he had high cholesterol, he had all of these things. And I sat him down, and because I'm a trainee, I'm fortunate to have sort of a 30-minute appointment window, which is a real luxury. I think we need it for our training, but I think if you have those extra minutes, I think you should use them and maximize them, because every contact matters. So I sat him down and I said, thinking to myself, this gentleman is maybe he's not going to listen, maybe this is going to go over his head, but he actually asked me, is there something else I can do, doctor? I don't want just medications all my life. So then we talked about some of the lifestyle pillars, which, you know, there are 6 pillars to lifestyle medicine. So there's nutrition, there is physical activity or movement, there is sleep, there is stress management and mental health, there is reducing or removing toxins such as, you know, smoking, alcohol, that kind of thing. And then also there is social connection. So all of these come together to form lifestyle medicine. And we sort of had a real deep dive, particularly into nutrition and exercise with this gentleman. And I, you know, laid down for him like some of the research in terms of, this is what, you know, if you try this particular style of, you know, just increase the amount of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, lentils, these sorts of things in your diet, even if you replace 1 portion of processed meat or red meat in your diet a week, you know, even that small change can make a real difference. And so I saw him 3 weeks after the initial consultation, where he'd gone away, done some homework, done some reading, and said, okay, doctor, I'm ready to do this thing. And so then, you know, we actually set out a bit of a meal plan for him, and we said, these are the things you can try. And we also then explored a walking prescription, because he was just not finding the time to do any kind of, you know, he said, I don't have time for a gym membership, I don't have money for a gym membership. I explained to him, you don't need a gym membership, you just need to be doing any move. Exactly. So anything you can do is better than not. So we did these 2 things, and he actually, I think to this day, has been following like a 80 to 90% whole food, sort of plant-based, plant predominant diet. And he's been continuing to do just 30-minute walks every day, 5 days a week.
That's actually an impressive amount of exercise. A lot of people don't get that.
No, it's pretty incredible. And but he's doing it, you know, because our health is such a powerful motivator, I think, for people, you know. And we don't just want to live a longer life, we want to live a better life. So and in terms of sort of his blood test, in terms of his blood pressure, all of the markers actually remarkably, you know, went down. And this is you know, just one example, and there are so many in the literature in larger scale studies, but I think this one was particularly gratifying to me, because I'd come into it with some preconceived ideas, which I shouldn't do, but we do. We're human.
Do you mind telling us,
like,
just maybe that he wouldn't listen, or
and no, it's incredible though, because I saw him just a couple of weeks ago, and he said, wow, like, I can't believe that this has happened, and he's continuing on. And I think that's just the most rewarding thing for me personally.
Oh wow, it's so amazing to hear that you do like essentially like lifestyle prescriptions, because some people, you know, you could give them medication or advise them on this and that, but giving people just like almost permission to and motivation to walk when they wouldn't usually do is quite like empowering, especially when that comes from an authoritative voice like your general practitioner, and with evidence you're telling them this is actually going to improve your you know, cardiovascular risk, etc. So I think that's really impressive. Tell us about other patients that you've worked with. And
sure. So there's I suppose there was another patient that did come to mind actually. This was a young lady in her 30s who had a big life sort of event happen, and she'd been going through, you know, some she just was going through a depressive episode, and had been quite sort of depressed in the last 6 months when I saw her. And we talked to, and the thing with depression is it's so you know, we're quite quick sometimes as doctors to prescribe medications for certain things. And in this case,
when doctors like yourself in general practice, you have such short time to see patients.
Absolutely.
You know what the pharmacological, you know, option is, and that may be the easiest one to dish out in that space and time. It
can be. It's like you know, you just press this button or like sign this prescription and then there you go, the problem's done. But that it's not quite as simple as that, as we all know.
Yeah,
And
loads of side effects, etc. And
absolutely. And we sat down and talked about actually exercise, because exercise today, there's increasing evidence that suggests that exercise actually is as effective as most major antidepressants in the treatment of mild to moderate depression. So much so that it's actually part of its first line treatment in our national guidelines, in our NICE guidelines for mild to moderate depression. So And
do you think many GPs actually like prescribe like walking like you do, or
I don't know quite. I don't know if there's data about what GPs prescribe for this, but I know that, given the NHS is in the way that it is, unfortunately, right now, general practice particularly is under so much pressure that it can feel sometimes slightly easier to prescribe medications, because even though they have side effects, we do also know that they are effective. But I think a lot of sort of just lifestyle medicine in general is not taught to us at medical school as doctors. We're not taught about nutrition. We're not taught about exercise. And it's a real shame that we're not, because this is 80% of the presentations that come to general practice are because of lifestyle, and a lot of them are conditions that can be prevented and reversed with simple lifestyle modifications. So I wish more doctors were doing this. And in terms of mental health, again, they've even done studies where this is a bit of a weird one, but they've done a study where they actually did fecal transplants. So they quite literally had the feces of somebody who was depressed. Yep. Somebody who was depressed, and they transplanted that into somebody who's not depressed. And the people who, and those people actually started to feel the same symptoms.
Well, I would be too.
Well, but
I see the logic. So is it like saying you are what you eat, and then the stuff that's coming out of you, if you put your waste, into somebody else, like what happens?
I think the sort of the point of this was that it's just showing the gut and brain connection, which is so incredibly powerful. So it's again to do with what you're eating, and we know that people who are depressed, their gut microbiome, for example, looks a lot different to somebody who might not be depressed. And there are certain bacteria within the gut of these people who might be depressed that are much higher. And interestingly, a lot like I think there are 3 particular bacteria which we don't need to talk about, but one we could talk about, which is called Hungertella. Hungertella is a bacteria, I believe, which goes on to produce something called TMAO, which we know the downstream effects of that. So TMAO is essentially produced by our gut microbiome when it comes in contact with some of the compounds found within red meat, for example. And TMAO, the downstream effects of TMAO is also increased risk of myocardial infarction or heart rate or cardiovascular disease, as well as increased levels of depression. So if we can, and this is a lot, of course, to do with what we're eating and our mood and things like that. So even something like mood disorders is very, very, truly impacted by
mood
what we're
disorders,
eating,
you're like
and the lifestyle that we're.
Anxiety as well.
Yes.
Okay. So all of those, conditions are potential outcomes. Okay.
And I mean, there's another one, I think it's called
very interesting names. Hungertella.
Yeah. Eubacterium ventriosum, I think it's called. It is something that it's a bacteria. It's a family of bacteria that can go on to produce butyrate. A butyrate is a short chain fatty acid. Sorry for the science, but it's a short chain fatty acid which is actually produced when we're eating lots of fiber. Okay, and so it's a good thing. The butyrate is a good thing. The short chain fatty acids is a good thing. However, in people who are depressed, we see that it's actually much lower in their bodies. And the other, worrying thing is that it's also when it's reduced, this bacteria in your gut, it is also associated with higher rates of colorectal cancer, not just depression. So yeah,
we really need to increase our fiber intake as well.
Absolutely. So, if you take nothing away from this, take away that, you need to have a diet that is high in fiber and fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. I could go on about this until next Christmas.
And will flexitarians get the same benefit? Because with your first patient, you said he's reducing his meat intake. He's not cut it out. I know I'm not ready to cut it out either. But definitely, I can have happily eat meals that are vegetarian or without meat. And I'm just wondering, would I still be gaining the benefit of having reduced my red meat intake? And
it's so interesting that you asked this question, because actually there was a study done, I believe, I think it's the Adventist Health Study too, where they studied so Seventh-day Adventists in I believe in California, but in North America, and what they found, and I think the Seventh-day Adventists are Christians who, by sort of as a function of their beliefs, they actually try to follow a certain healthy lifestyle. So some of them, will eat meat, but a lot of them won't. They won't smoke, for example. A lot of these things, and what they found in this study was there was a dose-dependent relationship with so the more that you tended toward a whole food plant-based diet, the higher your gains were, if you like. So the more overall improvement in your cardiovascular risk, the more improvement in your blood pressure, your BMI, all of these things. And there's when you say dose, it's like the amount that you're taking in. So there is a connection, and it's not like all or nothing. So the way to think about it is, the more plant-based that you are in your eating, in your food, in your diet, the more benefit you're probably going to get, according to these big, large-scale studies. And I think the practical way that I like to approach it with my patients in particular, and sort of, people in my life as well, is if you think of it like, if you fill yourself up, if you fill your stomach up with all the good stuff, right? You're going to have less room in your stomach to have the bad stuff.
Nice, simple explanation.
So the more that your plate of food contains plants, the less room there will be in your stomach to reach for the I don't know, hamburger or the steak or whatever. And it's really important, actually, and it's worth mentioning here that particularly processed meats, that the World Health Organization has classified this as a group 1 carcinogen, which is the same as smoking.
That's like cancer inducing.
So when they say it's a group 1 carcinogen, this means that it is a known cause of cancer in humans. It is associated with cancer. No, this is processed meat, which is your bacon, your sausages, these sorts of things. I can see. But these things are known as. It's not up for debate. It is simply, scientific fact now that these things cause cancer. So I wish there was more labels on food the way that there are on cigarette packets. This is going to cause you cancer, by the way, So maybe, that health warning would help, but.
Yeah, we need to speak to our public health colleagues about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is hard listening, and definitely something I want to be more mindful of and try better for myself to actually reduce meat intake. So thank you so much just for sharing more evidence about it, more information, and definitely arming me and arming different listeners as well, if there's anything that they want to reflect on in their diet. Did you tell us what happened to the second patient you mentioned? The one with
sorry, I don't know. Did I go?
I feel like we went into the evidence and then we.
We started talking about the science. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, so with this patient, she's in her
Had
30s
depression.
and she had like mental health. She was essentially a low mood and I would say between mild and moderate depression. We prescribed again. So we talked to her about I talked to her about what are the kinds of physical activities that you just enjoy more of,
Mhm.
and we realized actually she used to love cycling, for example, right? But she just didn't feel up to it and she just didn't want to do it. And we just said, why don't you just cycle for 10 minutes today and then add 5 minutes tomorrow and 5 minutes the next day and keep adding these 5 minutes until you're doing whatever feels comfortable for you. So it's like increasing that dose, right? So we titrate medications and we increase the dose of medication.
That
And so
makes
she
sense.
started increasing her cycling. And we did start her on a low dose of an antidepressant at the time, because I think at the time she also needed that. But having consciously and sustainably sort of done an exercise prescription, if you like, along with some food and lifestyle discussion, she was actually ultimately able to come off that medication.
Quite quickly.
Yeah, in
That's
4 months. And
impressive.
we discussed it in the practice. I discussed it with my supervisor, and we actually agreed. And she and again, I think she felt empowered to make that choice for herself. It wasn't sort of led by us saying, I
Yeah,
think you should come off this medication. She actually came to us and said, I don't want to have the
think I need it.
medication. I think I can do I'm going to do these things in my lifestyle. And
That's
and
awesome.
she chose to come off the medication herself, which was great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome to hear, like how much you have empowered her to, to actually take her life and her fitness into her own hands.
Mhm,
And that, she had such a drastic improvement after 4 or 5 months of,
mhm,
taking on those changes.
mhm,
And I love how you asked her, what exercise did you
mhm,
actually enjoy?
mhm.
Because there's no point prescribing someone running if they hate running.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
no,
yeah, I
it's
like that. And you've made a bit of a personal pivot yourself, going into not only lifestyle medicine, which you've told us about that qualification and diploma that you've done, and how you're incorporating that into your professional practice, but you've also started creating content, and that's exciting. Tell us more about that.
I think it's exciting, it's scary, it's a little bit nerve-wracking,
Mm-hmm.
putting yourself out there. But I think for me, the thing that motivates me to do that content creation, I don't know who's listening, I don't know who's watching my content at the moment, because it's very, very small channel. But even if one person can take some kind of small actionable step from that and benefit in their everyday life, I think that's what I want to see in coming out of any of the content that I put out there. Because
Yeah.
I think there's, like I've said before, as doctors, we never ever get taught about the benefits and the foundational role really that nutrition particularly can play in our lives and our healthcare. I think if there is if I've taken the time to educate myself, and I've had the opportunity to educate myself on this by doing a diploma, blah blah blah, it's all of these sorts of things. I
Mm-hmm.
think medicine is such a vocation, truly, where if you have the chance to educate a wider audience, I think it's almost, I see it as my duty to do so. If there is some knowledge that I've gained or some skills that I've gained, it is my duty to try to put that message out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully in an evidence-based, non-biased kind of way.
Yeah.
So my aim is not to sort of, impose my opinion on somebody. It's
Mm-hmm.
simply to present what the science says, and then you just
Yeah.
make up your mind yourself, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, again, I love your passion and the way you do that. It's clear that you are passionate about it and you're bringing people this information in a way that's quite easy to digest. I've learned a lot just following your channel as well for the last few months. So I was hoping you'll give us another just lifestyle nutritional tip, because one of the things I hear quite often is just the importance of eating a colorful meal and eating
Mhm.
fruits vegetables and different products that are of different varieties of colors. So just tell us why that's important and why that might be.
So I'm a big fan of color, as we can see I'm wearing orange. But I think, you know, there's a really simple 3-word thing we say: eat the rainbow, you know, and it's just incredibly powerful, because it really truly is just the most health promoting way to eat. If you eat a wide variety of colors in your diet, each of those colors, I don't mean Skittles and Smarties. I mean the colors that come from
food,
wholesome, natural fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, lentils. These things, they have the color that they have because, so for example, carrots or sweet potatoes are bright orange. They're orange because of beta carotene. That beta carotene serves as some kind of protect. It actually
helps with the eyes, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's a precursor to vitamin A, which is good for your eyes, which is good for your skin, all sorts of things. But blueberries, for example, blueberries or blackberries or anything that has that deep purple color.
Yeah,
that purple color is something called, it's a really powerful antioxidant called anthocyanins, and the reason that a lot of these fruits or these plants, for example, have that color is actually to protect the plant itself. Okay, it has actual protective mechanism for the plant. So if you imagine that it's giving protection to the plant that's growing inside of it, if you put it into your mouth, it's probably going to give you the same protection as well.
Never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and they're all different. So these different colors represent different phyto or plant nutrients. They represent different polyphenols, different antioxidants, and we know now that all of these different plant nutrients, if you like, compounds, if you like, they serve different purposes. They are anti-cancer, usually they're very anti-inflammatory. They're also they also help with sort of healthy aging, these sorts of things.
Great for skin.
Absolutely great for skin. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I can't recommend it enough. Just make sure that you're eating fruits and vegetables, not Skittles and Smarties. So anything that is like naturally colorful. But
that's so important. I was going to ask about one more thing. I said that was going to be my last main question, but one more thing is the soy diet. Like, you've talked a lot about like high soy diet on your channel and the connection with breast cancer as well. So I was just hoping you could tell us a bit more about that.
So I'd just like to point out that, so it's not necessarily a high soya diet, but it's more that it's important to include soya as part of a high fiber, whole food, plant-based diet, or balanced diet. The reason being is actually because I think soya has come in for a lot of bad press in the past, where, you know, there have been these ideas that, oh, soya can have feminizing effects on male breast tissue. It can have sort of increase the level of estrogen in males, and also this idea that potentially soya can increase our risk as women of breast cancer. And these things have been systematically completely debunked by the science in the last several years, in the last few decades, actually, not just years. So and bottom line with soya really is, if we're having it in its whole form, and if we're having
what does that mean?
So whole soya products would include, whole basically means things that, you know, you're eating as they were grown, right? As they were intended by Mother Nature. Okay, so I'll explain what I mean by that. So examples of whole soya products would be things like tofu, tempeh, edamame, and then certain soya milks as well. Because they are very minimally processed or not processed at all. The less something is processed, usually the better it is for you, and you're much more likely to sort of access the beneficial nutrients within them, because particularly with soya, it contains something called isoflavones, which is a form of, again, phyto or plant estrogens. And these plant estrogens, we now know, actually act in the opposite way to normal biological estrogen in the body. They do act on estrogen receptors in the body, but they actually largely act in the opposite way to normal estrogen. So for example, if you had biological estrogen, if you had excesses of biological estrogen, you'd be more likely as a woman to have things like breast cancer, things like endometriosis, and polycystic ovarian syndrome, these sorts of things.
Those conditions are linked to the estrogen levels in your body. Okay.
And also as a man, you'd be potentially more likely to have what we call gynecomastia, which is
breast tissue or
increased breast tissue in males, but also scarily prostate cancer. Okay. But soya contains these phyto estrogens or isoflavones, which act in the exact opposite way.
Completely different. Okay.
And interestingly, if we talk a little bit about estrogen itself, where do we get a lot of the estrogen? We get it actually from a lot of high-fat dairy products, because if you imagine, you know, the milk from a cow is going to be full of estrogen, right? That is biological estrogen, and it acts in a way to promote these things, you know, in terms of our health. But the soya actually acts in the other way. The only thing to say about soya is, you know, we have to try not to have the more processed forms of soya. So for example, soya protein isolate, which is found in a lot of protein powders, for example, or so these sorts of things, they have been linked with some slightly adverse health effects. But if we remember to have whole soya products like the ones we've talked about,
the tofu, tempeh, and edamame,
and some soy milks as well, and if you think about it, actually there's a whole part of the world where soya is consumed on a daily basis, just culturally. So that is your you know, Asian cultures, where soya has just been an integral part of their diet for actually thousands of years, not just in the last century since we've, you know, discovered it in the Western world, for example, right? And we actually see in these women who are following these traditional Asian diets with higher soya consumption, we see actually a very statistically significant difference in breast cancer rates and things like this, compared to
lower in those populations.
They are much lower, yes, compared to women who are consuming the standard American or SAD diet.
Yeah, I never realized that was the acronym.
It's quite fitting, really. It's quite fitting, I would say.
That's disturbing. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for breaking down so much nutritional advice for us, stuff about, you know, what you're doing and the impact you're making with lifestyle medicine in your, you know, daily practice. I don't know if there's much more you want to say, or otherwise I'd just love to hear where we can find you.
Okay. So you know, please follow me on my Instagram page, where like I said, I try to just I love I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like to read papers and I like to read research, and I like to just educate myself. So what I tend to do is I try to break down some of that scientific evidence that I'm reading myself about, and try to put them into videos that are sometimes funny, but sometimes not, because I have terrible sense of humor. But I inject my terrible sense of humor into my videos, and I try to hopefully out of that bring out some actionable steps that we can all take in our daily lives. But I think that the bottom line is, again, you know, it's not, I'm not out there trying to give people personalized medical advice or any kind of medical advice. What I'm trying to do is bring forth the nutrition evidence, and so that people can be empowered to make their own minds up, you know. So that's the purpose, just to educate people and myself.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll definitely put a link to your Instagram or TikTok, both or either one, underneath this YouTube channel. And do you have anyone else that you'd love for me to interview? Did anyone come to mind as you're thinking about that?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you can get in touch with them. How you probably get in touch with them via social media, but a couple of women that really do come to mind as real role models, and just they are physicians again. Dr. Shireen Kassam, she is the founder of Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. She's a consultant hematologist in her day job, but also runs a plant-based nutrition course at the University of Winchester. And she's just an absolute beacon of knowledge and light. And another doctor that comes to mind is Dr. Gemma Newman, who goes by, I think, Plant Power Doctor on Instagram and sort of social media in general. And she is, again, there's just so much to learn from these women. So I would encourage you to get in touch with them and, you know, make a really great episode.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. More networking, more nutritional advice. That would be amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. And let's wrap up there.
Thank you so much.